Okay, Eric is rounding people up for the analytic architectures session. 2 short papers on computational and representational architectures for supporting learning analytics. I'll just wait another 30 seconds for Phil to sneak across the stage here. And Stephanie, I'll name everybody as they go by to embarrass them. Maybe as soon as... Right now? Or at the end? No, I'll do it at the end. Okay. Okay. And here we have Sean Goggins, who's late, and Eric. Okay. Okay, so I want to introduce Dominik, who will speak on micro to macro analyzing activity in the role Sandbox, and he works with Ralf, who had to return home.
So thanks for the kind introduction. Is this on? Yeah, it is. So actually, my name is Dominik, and I'm presenting this work which was done together with Ralf at RWTH Aachen University. So the motivation, and this is where I really got thinking about the panel talk this morning, is increasing adoption of distributed learning services on the web. We all know the MOOCs, which are currently highly trending. What we've been working on in our project is PLEs, in particular responsive open learning environments, and probably in near future there will also be hybrids coming up. And what really is thrilling for learning analytics is that if you monitor these platforms, you get an unprecedented insight into learner behavior on a really large scale. This is probably something that was told this morning, that we are probably not that much interested in that, or we have big data really, we have to dig into that. So probably you will hear some arguments in my talk that will contradict, possibly add up to the things that were said this morning. Don't tear me apart afterwards, hopefully. What we see in the literature and also in the practice is that some proprietary techniques and data models are employed for very specific scenarios in which learning analytics is done. And these are sometimes biased, they are limited in terms of genericity, they cannot be applied maybe to other learning scenarios. And what we also see is that sometimes these try to evolve to new standards, trying to analyze learner behavior. But learner behavior is evolving, and therefore it's really inherently hard to model. And our approach now is to take a step back to existing standards that have been proven to work, at least for the web. And what we employ is simple weblogs. Why do we do that? First of all, it's a standardized byproduct of service operation. Of course, it then has a wide adoption, so every administrator of a web server will have these logs in place to detect some anomalies going on, maybe attacks, and these anomalies could also be then anomalies in learning activity. You have the lowest possible degree of bias because it's really low-level protocol data. You cannot just, if you attack these systems, you can, but if you really use a learning system, then you cannot introduce bias so well. They have generic low-level semantics, and we think that you can easily lift these low-level semantics also to higher-level semantics. If you think about RESTful web services and their semantics, you can do that. And what we claim in this paper is also that you can do analysis on multiple ecosystem levels from micro to macro. And what we also claim is if you use this kind of data, you have the highest level of data interoperability, which then also allows cross-service analysis. So the first requirement we focused on was focus and level of analysis, and here we refer to Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory applied to learning analytics. So you see this model here, actually the student is in the middle and you have 5 interrelated ecosystems and nested ecosystems around the student. The microsystem, which is established by the direct relations for example, to teachers, to mentors, to co-learners, peers. Then around that is the mesosystem, which is the entirety of the microsystems and relations among them. Then you have the exosystem, which are networks influencing the student, but not necessarily the student is member of directly. For example, the university and its steering committees and all these things. And then you have the macro system, which is even one level wider, describing the entirety of societal relations, like including norms, rules, etc. And you have the chronosystem, which is then giving a temporal dimension to all of this. So what we have found is that existing work often focuses only on very specific systems, only on parts of these different levels. And what we thought of was to claim that any comprehensive learning analytics framework should allow analysis and focus on all levels, because you have different stakeholders interested in this information. It's not only the learners or the teachers, but it's also people operating these systems, people, politicians, all of these people are interested in that data. What you may never do is neglect microdata. And you must always apply aggregation carefully, because there is always the danger of washing out the anomalies. And these are the things that learning analytics is interested in, to find some special behavior that probably hints to things where you have to place interventions. And it should work, referring to the chronosystem, with historical data, where you record previous learner behavior, probably find patterns in that, but also real-time data, which allow that you detect these patterns and then come up with timely intervention. So now I want to go to the next slide. Okay. So data interoperability was also one of our main concerns when you think about distributed services on the web. This is what we mainly dealt with in our work. So you need some kind of interoperability between the data, so you can combine different data sets and link them to each other. So you might know this comic. What happens is that many standards are coming up and people say, okay, probably this standard is not good enough for me, we need to invent a new one, and then the situation is even worse. And I think we have also seen this happening in learning analytics, that sometimes you have very high-level analysis data, which is convenient for the analysis, but you have the danger of losing the anomalies. Then you also have the risk, because standardization processes are really long, and there is no guarantee that, that your proprietary techniques and formats will eventually become standard and get adoption. So there is a risk when different organizations want to combine their data or want to analyze data together, then they often cannot do it because the data is not compatible to each other. So this often makes cross-services analysis complicated or even unfeasible. So why not build on existing web standards like web logs? This is what we did in this work. Probably we should also extend this by other techniques that are proven valuable from web analytics, and profit from the things that have been working since years for the web. Maybe they also work for learning analytics too. So this is an example of what the data is that we are talking about. Techies will probably know this, other people probably not so much. So this is what we have dealt with. This is the kind of environment we had. It's a widget-based PLE in which learners meet in certain collaboration contexts. So different learners meet in these somehow spaces, combine widgets as they like for certain learning tasks as they want. They can rearrange these widgets, people come in, people drop out, and all of these operations are covered by RESTful web services. And what do you get when you monitor web services? You get web logs. And this is one of those web log entries. You get an IP address, somehow giving you a hint who that was with a certain uncertainty involved, I have to admit. Then you get a date, you get an operation, you get URLs. This is a really important concept because you can then link things. You can use the linking structures which made the web so powerful. And then at the end, you can also get some other things. In this situation, it's an add widget operation, so you also get some kind of a widget URL, and you can also enrich this data. So with this low-level data, you can get other data from external sources, again making use of the power of the web. So for example, you can add geolocation to an IP address. You can see where it's coming from which city, which region, which country. Or for the widget URL, you can extract widget metadata. In Roll, we had a certain ontology which described widgets regarding the domains in which you can use them, the activities you can carry out with them, and with that information you get some more deep insight of what kind of learning is going on there. So how do you get to this information? You start on the left with a standard web server which produces standard log data, and this is then tailed into a pipeline of different very simple shell scripts, so nothing special here, which then clean the data a little bit, persist it, and do some custom processing, again making use of external sources. This is indicated here, how we did it for this small add widget operation. So you add IP geolocation, you can add widget metadata, and you can then extract these operations and put them into a database. So you somehow enriched and lifted to higher level semantics. Of course, you also have to think about analysis techniques. So you collect the data, but then what do you do with it? So we had a look at what kind of techniques we could apply. So of course, single operations, you do the analysis on a very low level, on the micro level, but with appropriate aggregations, careful aggregations, you could also lift that up to higher levels, up to the macro level. And you find rich relations in the log data. For example, you get the relation which IP address called which URL. Maybe you can then set up paths, so you can get sequences of learning activities in your log data. You could also set up actor networks. For example, people collaborating with each other, people using tools or tools having been used together. And with this you can do social network analysis, as we've seen in the talks before. Not only on people, but also on arbitrary actors. Then you have the temporal information, which allows time series analysis, so you can do that dynamically. You can also see how things evolve over time. And with an enrichment from external sources, you can do even a lot more. So I guess we have seen that weblogs allow a lot more than we have thought initially, and that's what we also were astonished about. So the benefits for learning stakeholders, not only the learners themselves, but also teachers or politicians or operators. First of all, you can create awareness, and I think we have also seen that in the talks before, that for example with the social networks you can show structures, community structures, or structures between tools, how they've been used together. Which can then finally lead to recommendations. This is not part of this talk, so I will not go into details here. So, to conclude this talk, and I hope I'm still within time, what we think every learning framework should do is prevent bias, limitation, and genericity to avoid missing anomalies. It should focus and it should take into account focus and level of analysis on multiple levels, not only one specific one, and it should enable large-scale cross-service analysis, especially in those settings where distributed web services are involved. It should combine historical and real-time information for intervention planning, and it should fight uncertainty. This is something we have dealt with in the paper. but due to time reasons, I couldn't do that here. So we make a strong argument for the weblogs, and referring back to the panel discussions of this morning, I guess we should not keep away from creating new standards because it's really necessary. These weblogs cannot cover anything, but still you can use them on a very large scale and create cross-service analysis, data interoperability, and all these things. Next steps are then for us to really carry out analysis, not exploratively, but really with an aim in mind. We have a big data set of over 8 million API requests from over 3,000 IPs from our role Sandbox. And probably we can even apply this approach to other projects because it's so simple to transfer. We don't have to adapt anything. Okay, that's it. Thanks a lot.
Okay, questions?
Sorry, maybe I missed it a little bit, but one problem with weblogs is how do you identify exactly the user and the session he is in? That's often a big problem with weblogs.
Yeah, that's really a problem. So if you do that based on IP addresses, there is really the problem that you cannot do it precisely. But for many people, it's like they use the same machines every day. You are right, yeah. But there are also other techniques that should add up to this, like page tagging, for example. This is something that is used in web analytics to make this whole problem a little bit less serious. But still, even with page tagging, you cannot differentiate users. For example, if you think about MOOCs, people can have different identities. Come into a MOOC, do a course, get a bad result, take another identity, do the course again. So this is not a problem that I guess other approaches can fight much better. The weblogs are imprecise in that respect, that's true. Huh?
I have a question about, in many of our logs, a single meaningful action for a person will show up like in 3 HTTP entries, like posting a message might require bringing up the page and doing a edit round and then posting, and so we have to aggregate into the meaning level of actions. So I guess that would be where you do the work here of converting a generic weblog into something specific to an application. Where does this application-specific semantics come in? And that would imply there's a level of representation that abstracts from the weblog to something that all the operations, the analysis you want to do, you want to be able to reuse them across different applications. So is that right? Do you actually construct a representation that abstracts from the weblogs? Or do you just stick with analyzing directly on the weblogs?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit, yes. I mean, but the data that you get is then usable for very many different scenarios, but you can lift from this data for different application use cases. For our case in Roll, it was we had the RESTful web services, and these web services itself have some certain semantics. They use HTTP as some kind of low-level protocol to model higher-level semantics. And if you have the documentation on these RESTful web services, then you know what's going on there. It's modeled. Yeah? So an HTTP operation with a post request somewhere means you add a resource to another resource. These are the low-level semantics, and then you can lift these higher to specific application scenarios.
Okay, yeah, so what I'm wondering about is if you write an analytic solution, can that be reused for a different application because there's an abstraction layer from the weblog, or do you kind of have to rewrite it for another application's weblog?
Yeah, I mean, this is where what we put then in the database. So of course we do not do the analysis on the plain text yet that you get from the logs. We put them in some certain database schema which we can query then. And that's what we also did. So we had some kind of visualization tools for that afterwards, which queried the database in a more convenient way, but still on a low level, and lifted it then.
Okay, do we have any other questions while Andy sets up here? Or, okay, I guess thank you again.
Thank you.
And It's, oh, on the back. His is on the back.